Welcome for the demonstration for scratch testing. So today I will go through how to do a scratch test in a UTM machine. So first of all, I just want to give you some brief introduction about the machine setup. So in here we have a lower drive. This is the flat stage that we use for scratch testing as well as for nano indentation. This is the sensor that we have. With the sensor, the indenter is connected. For today's test, we are using a very sharp indenter, and a capacitive sensor is used to measure the depth during the scratch testing. And for the sensor, there are different types of sensor we have. For today, we are using 5 kilogram sensor. That means the maximum load during the scratch test we can give is 5 kilogram, but for safety we'll go till 3 kilogram max for this type of sensor. If you want to use more load, then you just change the sensor into a higher load and do the scratch testing. And this sensor is connected to a data cable that is connected to the machine that reads all those data. And the lower drive is there are two different cables is connected to the machine. One is for the data cable and the other one is the power source to move the lower drive back and forth. The slider, this is known as slider, the whole setup or the upper stage, it will move left to right, and the lower drive it will move back and forth. In order to turn the machine on, there are two switches at the back of the machine that turns the whole machine. One is for the lower drive or motor, and the other one is for the carriage or the upper drive. Now that machine is turned on, so first of all you need to put your samples. In order to put the sample, make sure the sample is perfectly flat from the top and from the bottom. If there is any surface roughness or the sample is not perfectly flat, it will not give you good results, as well as it can damage the sensor. So before putting your sample, make sure the sample is perfectly flat. Now I will demonstrate how to do a scratch test. So in order to do so, you need to open some script file and option file from this software. In order to perform the scratch testing, we need to do the script file and option file from the software. The software we are using for this scratch testing is UMT. So it will be in the desktop of this computer. So open the UMT file, and then from the options there should be a option for load. So go options and then load. The tree folder will be open, and then you need to go to option files, UMT3, and then linear. The sensor we are using is 500 gram sensor, so the option file we will use is 500 gram. So there is one option file at the very end of this linear folder. It says UMT3 linear 500 gram indentation with cap sensor. So right now we are using the cap sensor, so you will select this option file from here. And the next step is choosing your script. In order to do so, you have to go to the script and then open script. From that linear folder, it's already in the option file, so you have to go back to the script folder. So go up into the tree folder, and then you will see the scripts. Click on scripts, and then there is a folder says scratch linear stage. Click on this, and then you need to choose 500 gram sensor with cap. So this is the script file. That's how we can modify the load, we can modify the time duration and time duration during the scratch testing. And in order to do modify the whole thing, first of all we have the preload. The preload is the load when the indenter will touch the sample, and it will provide some amount of load before the actual test began. So the preload should always be the same as the load that we provide during the test. So the preload and the load should be always the same. Today we will use 2 Newton load. So in the preload section you need to go to the FZ section, and then in the general section we have a 10-second preload. So that means the preload will be for 10 seconds. In order to change the load, you have to go to the carriage and choose the force. Now the force is -2 Newton. The minus is for the downward force that is acting during the test. For the lower drive, everything will be 0 because we are not moving the lower drive during the preload section, and even the slider we are not moving anything in there. So you need not to change anything during the test. Just only the carriage load that you need to change. It should be the same as the scratch load that is during the test. And then in the script and lift section, you need to go to the test. You don't need to change anything, just the data file. This data file will be the file that will generate during the script file. So you need to browse and save the name of the data file that you need to save during the test. So now today's data file will save as test4. So all those data that will collected by the machine will save in text4 data file. And then the load we are using here, we are not changing anything. So the load we are using for 30 seconds during the scratch test. The scratch test duration will be 30 seconds. The carriage load is 2 Newton. The lower drive, we don't need to change anything. The slider will move during the test, and the movement is 5 millimeter. So the idea is the slider will move 5 millimeter from right to left with 2 Newton load acting downward. After that we have lift and return to initial stage start position. So for these ones we just need to you don't need to change anything in there unless you change the slide during the scratch test. If you change it to 10 millimeter, you will change it here 10 millimeter, but we have chosen 5 millimeter, so the lift and return to the start position is already in 5 millimeter, so you don't need to change anything in there. And then if you don't do any multipass or anything, you don't need to select the last stage after that, just unselect those. But if you do multipass, then you can select the preload and the scratch and lift again, so that you can do the multipass during the test. So from this script file we only have preload, scratch and lift and return to the start position. So by using these 3 script file, it will scratch the test during it will do the preload from here, and then it will scratch the sample with 2 Newton load for 30 seconds, and it will move 5 millimeter, and then from this lift and return it will lift the slider up, and it will return 5 millimeter back to its original position. Now this is the script file, but in order to position your samples and the indenter in the right position, you need to open some the semi-automatic panel and position adjustment panel. So this is the semi-automatic panel. That's what you will get after clicking that icon in here. And this is the position adjustment panel. If you click on this, you will see this window will come up. It will adjust. You can use this position adjustment panel to move the lower drive and the slider back and forth, up, right and left, to position your indentation, like to position your indenter in the sample. Plus you also need this graph panel to see what is the force acting on during the test. Alright, as we are using the capacitive sensor, so we need the capacitive sensor graph so that we can see how much distance we are measuring during the test. So in order to get the capacitive sensor, you need to press this graph panel, and then there should be an option for cap. So select that one and press OK. So it will show you the capacitive sensor and the range how much distance it can measure. So right now it's at its maximum distance. So when we bring it back into the original testing position, it will show you a value less than 999. Now in order to do the test, first of all you need to adjust the position of the indenter. So in order to adjust the position, in order to move the lower drive, you need to press Alter and then these two bracket, left bracket and right bracket, to move the lower drive up and back and forth. So you can see from here, now the lower drive is moving back and forth, and you will use Alter to move it rapidly and use Control to move it slowly. So whenever you are in the range of the sensor and the indenter is very close to the sample, do not use Alter and left and right, just use Control to make sure you have complete control of the system. So it will move slowly and you can adjust the position with that one. Now in order to move the slider or upper drive, you need to press Alter and left and right arrow to move it left and right. So that's how we can move the slider. And up and down, you can select up and down arrow, pressing Control or Alter to move the upper drive up and down. Now I will try to position our indenter to actual testing position. Whenever you are in the range, do not use Alter, just press Control and try to adjust the position really slow. Whenever you are adjusting the indenter, make sure the indenter is not touching the sample. So right now the indenter is in the actual position where we want to do the scratch test. The lower drive back and forth, and we can move the upper drive up and down and left and right. So in order to control this motion, you need to go to the adjust current position. When this adjust current position tab is open, you can control both of these two drives. In order to move it first, you need to press Control and some arrows to move it first, and in order to move it slowly, then you need to use the Control and the arrows to move it slowly. So make sure whenever you are out in the really close with the sample, make sure you use Control to make it to move it really slow. Now in order to move the lower drive back and forth, you need to press Alter and then smaller less than key to move it forward, and greater than key to move it backward or to the machine. And for the upper drive, in order to move it up, press Alter and up arrow in the keyboard to move it up, and down arrow to move it down. In addition, if you want to move it left and right, press right arrow, Control or Alter plus right arrow to move it right, and to move it left, Control or Alter to move it left. If you want to move it slowly, just press Control, and if you want to move it fast, press Alter. Now whenever you are positioning the indenter to the sample, make sure you have some reading in the cap sensor. Right now the reading is around 999. but whenever you will be in the very close to the sample and the indenter is close to the sample, the cap sensor reading will change, and that's how you will be sure you are in the range. So adjust the cap sensor accordingly whenever you are positioning your sample or indenter to the sample. Now I will try to position my sample, my indenter on top of the sample. And whenever you are positioning your indenter, make sure the indenter is not touching the sample, but you can position it as close as possible to the sample. So whenever your sample indenter is positioned to the sample, then the next step is making the hardware 0 from the hardware, and you can make it the force 0 from the software itself. Before running the actual test, you need to make sure the forces are 0. So we have two different forces, one is Fx and one is Fz. In here Fx is showing as minus 0.1 and Fz is minus 0.14. We can make the forces 0 from the hardware and from the software. So make sure first of all you need to try to make it 0 from the hardware, and then you can make it 0 from the software itself. So now I will show you how to make the forces 0 from the hardware. So if you go back to the slider,
okay,
we have two screws in here. One says 0 Fx and the another one is saying 0 Fz. So in order to make the Fx 0, you move this screw so that you can see the in the software it is making the Fx 0, and if you change the 0 Fz, then it will make the Fz 0. Now as you see from the software in force graph, the Fx is changing and it goes to 0. Now I will change the Fz. Now right now the reading is showing minus 0.21, so I will try to make it 0 from the header by moving up this 0 Fz screw. Now the Fz is almost 0, it says 0.01, so the rest of the 0 will make it from the software. So just a quick review, in order to run any scratch test you have to have 4 different windows during the test. So this is the script file that will run the whole test. This is the semi-automatic panel from where we can make the force 0 by using the software. This is the force graph that will show the load, the instantaneous load when the machine is running the test. And we have one adjust current position panel that can move the stage and the slider up and down and left and right. So whenever the force is almost 0 from the hardware, the next step is making the force 0 from the software. So click the semi-automatic panel and then select that 0 all button from here, click it 0, then you can see the Fx and Fz will be 0 in the force graph. And when everything is 0, then you can press the script file. Before running the actual test, you need to make sure the forces are 0. So we have 2 different forces, one is Fx and one is Fz. In here Fx is showing as minus 0.1 and Fz is minus 0.14. We can make the forces 0 from the hardware and from the software. So make sure first of all you need to try to make it 0 from the hardware, and then you can make it 0 from the software itself. So now I will show you how to make the forces 0 from the header. So if you go back to the slider,
okay,
we have two screws in here. One says 0 fx and the another one is saying 0 fz. So in order to make the fx 0, you move this screw so that you can see the in the software it is making the fx 0, and if you change the 0 fz, then it will make the fz 0. Now as you see from the software in force graph, the fx is changing and it goes to 0. Now I will change the fz. Now right now the reading is showing minus 0.21, so I will try to make it 0 from the header by moving up this 0 fz screw. Now the fz is almost 0, it says 0.01, so the rest of the 0 will make it from the software. So just a quick review, in order to run any scratch test you have to have 4 different windows during the test. So this is the script file that will run the whole test. This is the semi-automatic panel from where we can make the force 0 by using the software. This is the force graph that will show the load, the instantaneous load when the machine is running the test. And we have one adjust current position panel that can move the stage and the slider up and down and left and right. So whenever the force is almost 0 from the header, the next step is making the force 0 from the software. So click the semi-automatic panel and then select that 0 all button from here, click it 0, then you can see the fx and fz will be 0 in the force graph. And when everything is 0, then you can press the script file. This is the semi-automatic panel from where we can make the force 0 by using the software. This is the force graph that will show the load, the instantaneous load when the machine is running the test. And we have one adjust current position panel that can move the stage and the slider up and down and left and right. So whenever the force is almost 0 from the header, the next step is making the force 0 from the software. So click the semi-automatic panel and then select that 0 all button from here, click it 0, then you can see the fx and fz will be 0 in the force graph. And when everything is 0, then you can press the script file. After pressing the script file, you can play or start here to run the test. For a review, right now we are using one scratch 5mm long and by using 2 Newton load, and the test will be for 30 seconds. So the test duration is 30 seconds. If you want to do multi-pass in the same direction, then you can choose that preload and scratch and lift again to do the multi-pass. And if you want to do reciprocating type scratch test, you need to choose different script file to do that reciprocating type scratch test. So for now we are using one single scratch with 2 Newton load and 30 seconds test duration. So just select that script file, play start. This is the script file for 500 gram sensor with capacitive sensor. Now this script file is showing the preload, scratch and lift and return to start position, preload again, scratch and lift and return and new position. So by using this script file we can do 3 different types of things. For now, in order to choose, preload, scratch and lift and return to start position is selected. This means the preload will do 2 Newton load during the test for 10 seconds, and then it will start the actual scratch test for 2 Newton load for 30 seconds, and the test length will be like sliding distance will be 5 millimeter, and lift and return to start position will return. You will lift the slider and it will move to the start position. Now if you want to do multi-pass in the same direction, then you also need to select preload and scratch and lift again, just to make sure start scratch and lift. So when these two are selected, that means it will do the preload, it will do the scratch and lift from right to left, and then lift and return to start position. By using this script file, it will lift the slider, it will move it back 5 millimeter to the right, and then it will apply the preload again, and it will do the scratch and lift in the from right to left again. Now if you want to do scratch test in a different direction, then you need to unselect these two or 3. So now you will have preload, scratch and lift. That means it will scratch in the from right to left, and then select this at the very bottom one, return and new position. It will start scratching from right from left to right again. So by selecting these 3 scripts, the test will be test will start from the right, it will go 5 millimeter to the left, and then it will go back to the right again 5 millimeter by using this script file. Now depending upon what type of test you want to do, you need to choose appropriate script file from here. So for now we are using preload, scratch and lift and return to start position. So by using these 3 script file, it will give the preload, it will scratch from right to left, and then lift and return will lift the slider and it will go back to the original position. So now we are using single pass for a 2 Newton load, 30 seconds, 5 millimeter sliding distance. So after selecting your proper script file, you can just press. After pressing the start, the test will begin. You can see the indenter will, first of all, it will give a 10 seconds preload, and then after 10 seconds it will move from right to left. The indenter is moving from right to left. Now the indenter, the slider is up and it's going back to its original position. And the test is finished.